Hey everybody, Professor Snart here, checking in as we finally get to, let's take a look at our due dates list here. Our first essay, which is about, halfway through our course, maybe even a little bit longer. I haven't checked the exact dates. But we're about midway, let's call it about that far. So like I've said a number of times before, we've put a whole bunch of pieces kind of out there. We've done, a paragraph here, learned about thesis statements, worked with sources now a little bit, or secondary sources, and now obviously we want to put them all together in what I would call really our first really formal and kind of higher point value assignment. So one of the first things to look at is obviously the extended time that you have to work on this from the Monday when we're finishing up Unit 6 all the way to next Monday, September 19th, which is really, truthfully, is almost too long given the compressed nature of our course, but clearly, this is, like I said, first formal writing assignment, like extended writing assignment, a bigger point value. So I want to give you as much time as possible to, again, put all these pieces into place because, now it really matters. So not to put too much pressure on it, but again, it's a glass half full, half empty sort of a thing. The half empty is, again, you have a lot longer to work on it. The expectations are much higher. The point value is much higher. So sort of a higher pressure situation. There's no way around it. The glass half full, though, is that, again, it's all stuff that we've been doing already, that even if you did it wrong in those sort of smaller point value situations, you would have hopefully gotten feedback or had the opportunity to ask me questions like, what did I do wrong? And hopefully we corrected that. So now you have the chance to put it all together where it really matters, but having had the opportunity to practice it first, basically, hopefully get it right. But even if you didn't, maybe you lose 5, 10 points even out of a whole 1,000. But then you learn from that mistake and now can do whatever that thing is correctly where it really matters. But, again, there's no way around that this is the expectations are higher. So even if you've been able to be successful doing like discussion boards in the past, for example, I haven't really been grading that hard on basics like grammar and, typos, unless they really get in the way. You can be pretty conversational, sometimes a little bit informal, and still do fairly well. So what you want to be careful of, though, is to understand that this is a different kind of writing situation. So unlike the more informal or conversational discussion board, this is a more formal academic essay. So we're looking for a slightly different kind of language. It doesn't need to get complicated all of a sudden, and it certainly doesn't need to sound like pompous or you go changing every word for using the synonym feature just so it sounds kind of like different or whatever. But it obviously has to be succinct, to the point, not like you're just talking with somebody. It really needs to sound like and look like you've invested, or used that time wisely to invest in doing outline, writing a draft so it looks organized, it's not repetitious. It obviously puts all of these pieces together. So one of the things that is useful here is not so much to look even forward at due dates, but almost backwards and think to yourself, like, what did we cover here? And that's now what's on the test, if you want to think of it that way. So a really sort of a long time, truthfully, to work on this essay, especially given its relatively short length, which we'll look at in just a sec. But again, a different kind of writing assignment, a different level of expectation here. So even if you've been fairly conversational but successful in the discussion boards, just carrying that forward won't guarantee that same level of success because we have a different writing situation, a different kind of writing that we're doing here. Hopefully, again, the expectations as they're laid out in the assignment and in terms of things that we've covered so far are still relatively transparent, so you're not guessing at what's expected of you. Again, one of my fundamental goals here, especially in teaching online where we don't have that, immediate face-to-face 3 or 2 times a week, is to really have the course be clear in terms of like what is incumbent on you to do to be successful. And then it's your job to make sure that you're working through the material, covering stuff that's in the units, but also that you're directed to like the MLA citation stuff, understanding obviously the grading guidelines and things that we've been through before, almost from the very start of our course. So there's Again, hopefully it's all transparent, but that doesn't mean it's supposed to be easy. It's just supposed to be understandable, so you know what's expected of you, and you can go to the resources in our course, whether it's within individual units or again sort of items in our course menu, where you can find models, examples, the sort of theoretical concepts that we've covered, and now you can put those into place because you know that those are the expectations. That's what's now kind of on you to complete. Okay, so let's look at the essay assignment itself. So again, about halfway through our course here. Okay, so before we even get to the assignment, note that there's still more content to work through, and this is why I say, you know, we have longer within this unit, but you're not just jumping to the essay, kind of winging it, even if that's sort of been marginally successful in the discussion boards, because that is just not going to cut it. And again, the grading standards are higher here. There's more points on the line, so you really do have to invest the time. So we have a number of sample essays that I'm providing here. They're not perfect by any means, but they'll walk you through, and they're not just you having to read and sort of guess at what's good and what's bad in these. They're actually annotated, and this video here is a video explaining how the annotated essays work. So the essay will pop up. You can sort of see it in the video here. It's a text screen, but there's also audio narration you can listen to, and little notes about effective moments in an essay or ineffective moments in an essay. Remember, we're not reading so much for formatting, like how they maybe format their paragraphs, as far as indent or no indent and the spacing and all that. Just kind of ignore that part of it. That's more of just a web presentation thing. We're reading for like the tone, the scope, how they outline a thesis or a topic sentence, you know, how they provide that, how they support that with direct quotation, all of that kind of stuff, sort of like the overall tone or the feel of the essay. There's 3 of them to work through. There's nothing that you really have to do other than take a look at them. But again, when I go to grade your essay, if it's clear to me that you haven't done this work because you're just making mistakes that are pointed to, say, directly in some of these audio essay annotations, then, you know, that's fundamentally wrong. It's like you learn something factual in class and you say 2 + 2 is 4 in class, but then on the test you write 5. It's a simple factual mistake. So there's not as much gray area or magic or subjectivity as some people think. And really my goal here is, like I said before, to have the expectations be pretty transparent, so you're not having to guess about like what's expected on the essay. You just sort of know. And if you've worked through the content of the course, meaning this, but also all the units before, you really have a good sense of what to do and what not to do in the essay. And, you know, I should point out that the point value only increases from here. So our final essay is really like the capstone. I think of it as a capstone not just for this course, but for the whole 1101, 1102 sequence, where you're really putting all of that stuff into place. So again, you know, it's a lot of work, so the point value should reflect that investment of effort. Okay, so again, the essays to work through, you're just kind of reading and looking for how they sound and how they operate. A quick video on integrating sources, because obviously that's going to play a huge part in this essay, but also, of course, going forward in our course. And this includes primary text, right, when you're quoting from a short story, for example, but also secondary stuff that is the product of the research that you're doing. Okay. So that's folder number 1. We take yet another kind of MLA break here. A couple of videos walking you through using a database and actually building a works cited. Some reminders. Gosh, I mean, there's just like lots and lots of examples, really repetitive from stuff that we've already looked at, that's already available in our citation link here. The idea being that you have lots of examples and info in front of you, so the expectations are there, the examples are there to follow, and you can just put 2 and 2 together to get 4, not 5, right? Okay, finally. The folder you've all been waiting for, the essay assignment itself. Okay, reminders to use your time wisely. I won't review that here. Actually, a fairly straightforward assignment despite all of the text here to explain it. So we're just doing a short essay based on just one of the works that we've read so far, so one of the short stories from class. You're going to be using one secondary source, so everybody's works cited page will have at least two sources listed. One, the short story, the primary text, and the other secondary source from a database. We've talked about what's appropriate and what's relevant, so that, of course, has to be happening. And you're just responding to one of these prompts, obviously not trying to work in all of them. We're looking at about 3 to 4 pages, probably 4, honestly, once you get your quotes from primary text, quotes from secondary sources worked throughout. It's really not a lot of writing, but there are a lot of things that you're bringing together. So sheer page number, it's not that onerous, but again, there's lots of pieces that you need to fit into the puzzle. So we want to explore the role of stereotypes, or you could talk about expectations. They're related, obviously, but pick one of those key terms. Don't float back between 2 or 3 throughout the essay. Discuss how setting is used and the theme or the theme of change or initiation. And you can see that the stories that we've read, they all kind of lend themselves to just about any one of these. So it shouldn't be hard to choose, except that you could almost do any of these for any story. So you shouldn't be really challenged to figure out at least one way that you can talk about like expectations in one of the stories that we've looked at. One quick note on option 2 here. I think the setting question is a really interesting one, but you do have to be careful. So what we don't want to say is that setting is used in a story to paint a picture for the reader or to tell us where something occurs. That's how setting works in any story. So what you want to do with this one is connect setting, or multiple settings maybe, to how that's used to communicate a certain theme in the work. And I think Alice Munro's Boys and Girls is the perfect example of this, where we have multiple settings within that kind of general farm setting of the story, and each of them is gendered differently. So there's the sort of inside domestic female space, there's the outside more male-dominated space, and those are played off against each other. And of course there's the whole pen system that the foxes are in, and that sense of entrapment. There's the idea of the horse in the corral, but the girl opens the gate as this sort of freedom, but it ends up being kind of a false freedom. So those are all aspects of setting, and we don't just want to say that way we understand where the story is. I mean, that goes without saying. What you'd want to do is connect those uses of setting to the larger kind of thematic issues that are happening in the story. Okay, so the rest of this is really just reminders of stuff that we've talked about or looked at various other places throughout our course. It's not an exhaustive list, of course, but it reminds you, I think, of some of the highlights. Obviously, stuff about relevant and appropriate sources here. We want quotation from primary and secondary sources throughout the essay, not just kind of tacked on to the end or something like that. We want quotations integrated, so they're not just sitting there as their own sentences, right? No I voice, so we want a level of formality, and again, that doesn't mean it has to be complicated or sound sort of silly or pompous or anything like that. We obviously want to make sure that in-text citation is there and we have a proper works cited page. I will often, when I grade, flip right to that works cited, and if that looks good, right, it's often an indication that, well, you've understood, you followed the models, you can put it into place. Often the rest of the essay will look good, often. The opposite is true. If this works cited page, which is sort of objectively just right or wrong, if it looks all messed up, then probably the rest of the essay is going to be messed up as well. So it's a pretty clear indicator for me what direction the essay is going to go before I even read the essay itself. And a bunch of other reminders, again, how to cite stuff from our textbook, even though it's an ebook, it's not that different. Article from an online database, which everyone's going to have as their secondary source. So again, it's not mysterious or magical here. The links are right there for you to follow, and hopefully you feel like you've got lots of time to work through the folder material here, but also to really work on crafting a strong essay, because we do now have our really first, I think, formal writing assignment. Okay, so now more than ever, important to be in touch with me if you have questions or concerns. And I always say that confident writing tends to be good writing. So when you feel confident that you have a good topic, that you're doing things correctly, that your source is the right kind, it just makes the writing easier, but it also makes it fundamentally better. So all the more reason to, if you have any doubts at all, just shoot me an email. I'll get back to you. And then you feel more confident. Again, the quality of the writing just improves. All right. So I will talk to everybody soon as we get past the halfway point in our 8-week course here.